Hello, IPXers. It's your host, Sandro here. If you're involved in the design process, whether you're an OEM, whether you're a designer, whether you're a maker, there's a point where you go from evaluation to creation. Is when you move from the evaluation hardware to your own custom PCB, your own custom hardware. We're going to be going through a process today at ipXchange where we undertake that journey ourselves just to show some of the pitfalls that you might come through and how we overcame them, how we decided to work around them. In order to answer this question, the project we decided to undertake is creating a custom PCB based on an evaluation kit that we're going to procure. Now, the first step of any good engineering project is going to be the research. Listen, you're going to have to do it. It's not normally the most fun section, but sometimes it can be. Sometimes you can encounter new technology that you really want to play around with. But the research is very important. Some factors that we have to look at is how well supported something is, what the capabilities are. And in our case, we decided to go with Nordic Semiconductor's NRF54L15. So we're going to make a breakout board based on this chip. And the reason we decided to do this is because Nordic Semiconductor actually has a robust community. So a lot of issues that you can encounter will have been documented by the community. Now, DevZone allows people to create tickets for Nordic Semiconductor hardware that they've made, including custom hardware actually. So they can go and put a ticket on there and they can interact with the community. They can share their files and people can have a look at it and tell them what their issues might be. Of course, if you're making a commercial product, you probably don't want everyone to know your design. So Nordic Semiconductor's DevZone actually has a way for you to confidentially share your design with Nordic engineers, and they will provide that same service for you. And they'll also provide the service on the community side as well. So that's one very compelling reason to use Nordic Semiconductor. And believe it or not, this is a free service. So you don't actually need to pay for this, and you will have an engineer evaluate your hardware. Now, that's not the only reason. Of course, they have robust documentation in general. So their data sheets are good. They contain the relevant information. They have reference materials. They have a lot of data. They even have classes and courses that you can take to help you understand what you're doing when you're using their hardware. It's got a very, very good ecosystem. If you're moving from evaluation to your own custom hardware, this is the kind of information that will just make the job 100 times easier. With that being said, that's just the first step. Assuming you've already evaluated the hardware, now you need to actually set up the environment. You need to make sure you have the correct tools to actually enable you to start the design and development process. First, we're going to start with what we need for the software side of things. You would likely already have this installed if you've been evaluating the kit. So we'll start there. So you might need NRF Connect, both on VS Code as an extension, and also you might need it separately just to help you debug. You can just use the extension only. But one thing to note is you need to make sure to install the SDKs and toolchains. You need to also make sure that you have all the different directories and settings set up correctly so that NRF Connect for VS Code knows exactly where to save. For example, save your apps, where to save your custom boards, where to save your SDKs and toolchains. Installing the toolchains is quite simple. You just need to actually go into the option where it tells you to manage your tool chains. I recommend you start with the SDK. The latest SDK 3.3.0 actually comes prepackaged with a toolchain. So once you install that, both of those will be installed. Make sure you set the correct directory for it. Don't put it too far into a chain of folders because this might cause issues. That is the software side of things. Now is the hardware side of things. Now on the hardware side, you need to make sure that you have some sort of EDA to design your custom PCB. In this case, we're going to be using KiCad. It's free. It's capable for, how much it costs, which is £0. And it allows you to create professional PCBs like the one that we're trying to emulate. We have the EDA, we have the software covered. Part selection can be done through things like Mauser, OEM Secrets, Farnell, but that's not the focus of this video. So now we've set up the environment, we can actually move on to creating the hardware. Now, we could start with software because of Zephyr RTOS. Now, just a little bit about Zephyr RTOS. It's OS that you can put on your Nordic devices. It allows you to essentially have an abstraction layer between your hardware and your software, which means the software is actually agnostic to the type of hardware you're using. So you don't actually need to have the hardware developed first. You can actually just develop on the development kit, later create your hardware, make sure you define it properly, and then shift your program over. But for the sake of keeping the experiment agnostic itself, funnily enough, we're going to start with the hardware. we have a blank KiCad, and the world's our oyster. So we have a project in KiCad, we create a schematic. Now normally you would start with a block diagram, but it's just a breakout board, so we can skip that step. This is like an abstract version of what you're going to have later on in the PCB design layer. But in the schematic layer, it's just all about defining those connections, using net ports, using direct connection buses. All of that is defined here. In this case, we used Nordic's reference design. They actually broke the nRF54 down into its different peripherals. So it's not just one chip like the way we added it in our design. It's actually broken down in different peripherals, and then you can see how they've decided to hook everything up. You can also see some differences which would later cause problems, but we'll get into that later on, of course. So once we have that reference design, we then translate it over, remove what we don't need, we add what we do, and then we're ready to go to the next step, creating a bill of materials. And the reason you do this is so that you can have an actual real life size representation of these different parts in the next step. Now you move over to your PCB design. Now KiCad allows you to just straight up create PCB design based on your schematic. However, the parts aren't ordered. They're all just populated for you, all the footprints. So you arrange all the parts, you connect them all up using buses or traces. And these traces allow you to dictate the flow of electricity from one component to the next. It's important to make sure that your PCB is properly designed. There's a lot of things that you can do incorrectly at the stage. Like for example, you can end up accidentally making an antenna if you don't wire things correctly. This is where you then move on to the fabrication. In our case here, ipXchange, we don't actually have any fabrication capabilities. So we have our PCB fabricated by a third party. We can solder those, so we do solder the headers on. We solder some of the components on directly. But once this is all done, we have what is essentially an empty shell. So this hardware is not actually useful for anything. It's at this point a paperweight. So this is where we now need to go into the software. Now software is where a lot of projects go to die. Software can be quite finicky, you know, small syntax errors can accumulate, create issues, and then you're hunting down a row comma or a capital letter that's not meant to be there. And sometimes the issue is silent and the problems only appear further downstream. However, we're not here to talk about the issues. We are here to talk about Zephyr RTOS though. Zephyr RTOS is the operating system that we are going to be using. It's the operating system that Nordic Semiconductor uses on their chips. And what makes it special actually is that it has a sort of abstraction layer that lets you use one application for various different hardware configurations. But this doesn't happen magically. You actually do need to set up the hardware configurations for each different variation you have on the hardware, or whether you want maybe the same hardware with two different configurations. However you want to set it up, you do actually need to create that setup. We're going to use NRF Connect for VS Code. In the sidebar, you can click NRF Connect, and one of the options actually is to create your own custom PCB. When you click this option, you then get a form, and this form will include stuff like the code name of your board, a human readable name, vendor, and most importantly, what chip your PCB is based around. In this case, it's going to be the nRF54L15. Now just make sure that the board directory that you save this board to is underneath the board root you set earlier in the NRF Connect settings on VS Code. And then make sure all the details are correct, and we can build our board. Our board now is going to sit in the board root where all the other boards are going to go, which we set up when we set up the environment. This isn't complete though. It'll be a bit easier if it was just this, but we do actually have to enable the different functionality of the board, because right now there's just the template based on the nRF54L15. But we need to enable certain peripherals, we need to make sure that our LEDs are set and our buttons are set. So how do we do this? Well, there's two ways. The first way is you can use the files. So the DTS files and the DSTI files will contain the different configuration options, and you can programmatically change them here. But that's prone to error. You need to know the syntax, you need to know the names of everything. So just to make it a bit easier, we're going to use the second option, which is using the GUI. But to get to this GUI, you actually do need to build a program first with that hardware as a build configuration option enabled. So how do we do this? Again, using the NRF Connect sidebar, we just open the options, and one of the options will be to create a new application. So we can create a blank application, name it setup, for example, And then we can use this as the basis where we're going to build our custom PCB files. So once we've selected the new application, we've created the new application, you'll see that there's actually build configurations underneath the application. And that's where all the different hardware configurations are going to sit. So this is where we're actually going to make the custom PCB hardware configurations. We click create new build configuration. Again, another form pops up, we fill it in. Most of it should already be filled in, whether that's toolchain, SDKs. But the important section here is we need to select the board that we're using. It will be in the all list, but you can filter it to custom PCBs only. And then we're going to select the CPU version of our custom board. Once that's done, we can build the configuration. And once it's built, we can now access the device tree GUI, which will contain two components. So the first component is all different functionalities of the chip. And the second is the physical connection points, the pins of your chip. When we go into the second option, we can see that actually all the peripherals are disabled by default. So we have to enable the peripherals, select the different GPIOs, and then we can actually assign the pins here to various names. Now these names are going to be the same across all the different hardware configurations. So if you wanted, for example, a status LED, we can call it LED 0. In other hardware configurations, we'll also have to call it LED 0 so that in the program, when it refers to LED 0, it now knows it's talking about specific pins, whether that's pin 1 on one MCU and pin 2 on another MCU. But that's how the abstraction layer works. So you can see here that we've defined all our pins, we've defined our LEDs, we've defined our buttons, and we can then move on to the next step, which is creating the program. So we can create, again, a new program, or we can use one of the example programs as a starting point. But essentially, the things we need to do with our program is we need to make sure that there's some sort of Bluetooth connectivity, because we want to test the connectivity. We have an antenna, and we want to test the GPIO. So we want to test Bluetooth, we want to test the GPIO breakout capabilities, and we want to test out if the buttons are working as well. We're going to create a program that has 3 different tests. So the first test will be on the status LED. We're going to make the program quite simple. So it's going to be a simple loop where the LED turns on, it turns off, it turns on for a little bit longer, then it turns off for the same amount of time as it turned off before, then it turns on for a bit longer, then it turns off again for the same amount of time as it did before, then it turns on for the longest period of time, and then turns off for a little bit, then goes back to the start again. So that's going to be our first little test, noticeable from boot. If we reset, it's of course going to reset that pattern all the way to the start. So we can test the reset functionality, we can test the status LED on the board. However, that doesn't tell us much about the GPIOs. So the other thing we're going to do is we're going to connect 2 different LEDs to different pins on our board. So this is going to test if the GPIOs work. And then through the program, we're going to make the 2 GPIOs turn the LED on using different conditions. First condition is going to be that we push the button. Once we push the button, one of the LEDs is going to toggle on. And the second is going to be that Bluetooth signal is received from NRF Connect Mobile. So the NRF Connect Mobile is going to enable the other LED. So if all 3 of these things are working, so that's the status LED, the button LED, and the Bluetooth LED, we now know that our board is fully functional and works. Now, before we show the success, we do need to talk about the failures, and there's going to be a lot of these during the process. No engineers sit down and say, listen, we're going to make code that doesn't work, we're going to create hardware that doesn't work. There's not a cabal of engineers saying, oh, we want to stay in the job, so we're going to make really crappy hardware and software. It's not a thing that people purposely set out to do. However, it's something that almost invariably ends up cropping up during the development cycle. So it's something that needs to be anticipated, and it's something that needs a plan of action laid down. If you remember all the way in the first segment where we're doing our research and we decided to pick Nordic Semiconductor and specifically the NRF 54L15, you would remember that one of the factors when we selected this chip is that it has a lot of support. And the reason is if we encounter issues, we're not all on our own. We're not relegated to banging our head on the wall until we find out what the issue is. Now, we're going to go over a case study of one specific issue we had. First, what was the issue? The issue was we couldn't flash the PCB. Now, this is a big problem. We designed it, we brought it all the way up to this point of the development cycle, and it just wouldn't flash. Why? We don't know. Because the board was being recognized as connected through the programmer, it was being recognized as connected in VS Code. However, when it was time to flash it, there would be errors, or it would flash successfully, but nothing would happen on the board. we were confused as to why that was happening. There was a time where we actually decided to leave the board, you know, on our workbench, go and have a quick coffee and come back. And by the time we came back, it was flashing blinky, which was a bit confusing because why was it flashing now? Because this was 20 minutes ago where we actually flashed it. And yes, it was successful, but nothing happened. So this made us think maybe there's a brownout, maybe blinky takes it above the threshold and it browns out, and then maybe there's some shenanigans going on and then it doesn't brown out later on. So we tried it with a bit more complicated software and it just wasn't working at all. Luckily, we had a safety net. We had DevZone. So we decided to test DevZone by sending them the schematics and the BOM of the device and asking them if they can identify what the issue is, if they can give us a diagnostic of the problem, a root cause analysis, so to speak. So we decided to act as if this was a confidential design. So we wanted to see how the process would be for people that want to commercially release their product, people that want to keep the design confidential. So we ended up using the Nordic engineers in DevZone. We sent the ticket, and after a few days of back and forth, they actually managed to identify the problem. And the problem went all the way back to the very first design decision we made, which was using a 32 megahertz crystal in order to allow Bluetooth connectivity. Now, this wasn't a wrong choice, but the reference material was using a 32 kilohertz crystal. Now, if we were following the reference design exactly, we would have used 2 crystals instead of the one we ended up using. We would have used both the 32 megahertz crystal to enable that Bluetooth communication, as well as using the 32.768 kilohertz crystal. So, of course, when we create a new custom PCB, that reference design is what that custom PCB is going to be based around. So it was based around the idea that we would have a 32 kilohertz crystal connected to the chip. Now, of course, we didn't, which you can imagine causes a lot of communication errors between the different boards, which is why the board wouldn't flash. So once this problem was identified, we got our solution. We were able to go back into the device tree and then disable this expectation and enable the internal timer of the chip in order for it to use that to communicate over SWD and complete the flashing process. Once that was done, you can see the board flashing beautifully. You can see everything working as intended. Thanks to Nordic's support, this problem was a lot shorter lived than it would have been if we had to trawl through all the data sheets and discover why the issue existed in the first place. In fact, we weren't even looking at the crystal at all. We were looking at power issues, but it ended up being something very easy to fix with just a single line of code to proceed to the final stages. You can see the board working here. You can see it working beautifully, connected over NRF Connect Mobile. We can enable or disable the different external LEDs using the buttons, and all in all, the project went beautifully, everything came together well, and we actually have all the files in the description for you to try for yourselves if you want to create your own ipXchange custom board. Now, if you've enjoyed the video, if you've enjoyed seeing the different processes we went through, how we solved the problems, how we created our own hardware, then leave a like, leave a little comment. What would you have done differently? Maybe what hardware, what software would you have used? If you like what we do here at ipXchange, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for the next video where we will be discussing various different technologies that are out and about today. And remember, guys, remember ipXers, stay disruptive.